Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacqueline. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hi, red.olaughlin here with the USA Global TV and Radio Network. We've been doing a series on fat management, and this is number 5 of 6. Today, our primary topic is what stops fat from burning. We've talked about what is fat. We've talked about what causes fat to go into a fat cell. We've talked about what causes fat to come out of a fat cell. Last week, we talked about what causes fat to burn. And this week, we're going to talk about what causes fat to stop burning. And let's go ahead and see if I can get my slides set up here. Okay, that's one. Let's go back one. Disclaimer, I'm a researcher. I have never been in the medical industry. I'm not a doctor, a medical physician. I've never been in the pharmaceutical industry. I research the human body at the cellular level, biochemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem. Treat a symptom, and you'll always be treating symptoms. And when we're talking about losing weight, losing inches, you might be doing 2 or 3 things right and 10 or 15 things wrong, and we just don't even know that they exist. And as part of this fat management awareness and education program that we're putting on, we're going to cover those things that, yeah, this is what probably is happening, but all these other things are happening too. And sometimes you may actually need to have a professional step in and do a test or do something to help you. But right now, this is for awareness, it's for education, and we're going to talk in the details that we need to know about. Fat management, that is, what is our body's ability to store and retrieve fat? We talked about that on the front end. What causes fat to go into a fat cell? What causes it to come out of a fat cell? Now we're talking about it's come out of the fat cell. We got it out. How do we make it burn? How do we actually stop the inches from growing and growing and the weight from increasing? Well, last week we talked about what caused fat to come out of a fat cell. So once you get the fat out of a fat cell and it's available for burn, we use the term burning. It's really not a burn. We're using it for energy in a sense that it's a fuel, and we burn fuel for energy. But in reality, the byproduct is carbon dioxide and water vapor, and that's what leaves our body. So, but anything that causes fat to come out, anything that causes fat to go into a fat cell is going to stop fat burning. So that is, primarily sugar. We talked last time about insulin. Insulin is the death for any kind of weight loss. If insulin's going around, especially insulin, you have sugar, you're using, you're burning. Fat is not an equation. Yet you can burn fat and sugar at the same time, blood glucose and sugar, because depending on what's going on in the body, you may have stored fat as glycogen in the muscles that you're really using for an intense workout. And you're also burning the sugar because that's what's also available. So there are some times you can actually burn both together, but it depends on literally the demand, what kind of exercise, what kind of things are going on that require that much energy to be burned at the same time. But I want to talk about 3 things today. The first one is, what are the things that actually just stop fat burning just right in its tracks? Just, time out. We're not burning any more fat. Then we're going to talk about quite a few things that slow down our basal metabolic rate, our BMR. When we slow our metabolism down, we're not burning fat as quickly as we did before. And as such, in order to burn a pound of fat or lose an inch in your waist or wherever, that may take 2 times, 3 times, 4 times longer. And then there are some other things that act in a contradictory way for us to lose weight. Part of it causes us to eat more than we don't want to be eating more. So those are the things that we're going to be covering today. So what stops fat from burning? Well, anytime you have blood sugar, sugar is the death knell for fat burning. When that sugar enters into the system, we leave the world of burning fat, which is ketosis. and we start burning sugar again. So if you're eating something and it has a carbohydrate that converts to a blood sugar and you were burning fat, now all of a sudden you switch back over to burning sugar. And you have to burn all the sugar up before you start burning fat again. In an ideal world, you're at perfect weight, everything's fine. You eat food, you burn the sugar from the blood glucose, it goes into the muscles, and then later on the day, we switch over to burning fat. And then tomorrow morning when we wake up, we eat again, and we start this whole process over. We eat just enough, exercise just enough, so that when we are eating, everything that we ate is used up, and we don't gain a pound, we don't lose a pound. And that's an ideal world. And we probably had that in our lives way back when. But as we get older, lots of things change. And as such, we are seeing it takes longer to do this, or it can't do it at all. But sugar in and of itself is a major problem. Refined carbohydrates, just all sorts of things out there that literally stop. White bread, probably one of the worst things you can have if you're looking at a measurement on the glycemic index of how much sugar is in a product. We have this thing called high fructose corn syrup. It's added to a lot of our food products, a lot of production in packages, jars, cans. And high fructose corn syrup is literally like steroids of sugar. And it actually sends an immediate message to the brain saying, hey, time out, no more fat burning. It's a serious dilemma when you want to lose weight and you're taking in high fructose corn syrup. So if you're having a Coca-Cola, you may only have a half of it. That's still some serious amount of fructose corn syrup that's going into the body. So sugar, fructose, corn syrup, pretty much in the same family. But what's not in the same family that sometimes we have a borderline issue with is dehydration. Our bodies need water to make everything work. But occasionally we end up in a situation where we're dehydrated. And if there's not enough water in our body, basically we're stopped burning fat. The body changes over to a different survival mechanism, and it just stops burning fat. In fact, it actually is very detrimental to us. It slows down the metabolism. It does a lot of things. So that iced tea, the coffee, there's caffeine, there's other things in there. But water hydration is super critical. A lot of times we wake up in the morning and we think we're hungry and we're really dehydrated because we haven't had anything overnight. You take a drink of water and whatever hunger issues you thought you had stopped. So dehydration really starts the minute you wake up in the morning. And we're going to be talking a little bit more here toward the end about hormones and how they influence the fat burning processes. From the dehydration, you have the kidneys and the livers that can be affected a little bit because of the way that they prepare fat for burning. And when we start having that dehydration, the fat is now, our fat metabolism basically stops. And as we look at our hormonal issues, we have issues where the energy, hormone efficiency, just lots of things out there stop. And when we do that, now we're creating problems. Let's switch to the next slide. Basal metabolic rate. This is the second series. We talked about sugar, dehydration, and some hormones. It's just flat stopping our fat burning in its tracks. But there are other things that can slow down our fat burning process. We may not have sugar in our system, but we have other things going on at the same time in our bodies that instead of running at 100%, we're running at 60% or 30%. And one of those is a nutrient deficiency. One of the things I talk about a lot is balanced nutrition in our eating. Well, there are certain things if we're deficient in, it creates problems. Your primary vitamins, A, B, C, D, and E, omega-3s, zinc, magnesium, calcium. Those are the things that create problems. Well, one of the things that calcium creates as a problem is the fact that it's needed in so many places in the body. It is essentially what controls our thermogenesis, our body's core temperature, what sets the burn rate for our metabolic processes. So when we have too little calcium, our body temperature, core temperature is turned down. We're not burning as much. It's almost like putting it in the freezer. Our belly fat increases. The rates of obesity increase with people that have very low levels of calcium. You look at the other ones with regard to omega-3s and a lot of other things out there in that same category, and they all have a separate impact on things. We look at inflammation, and I'm talking about primarily inflammation at the cellular level. This is the place where all disease starts. Chronic low-level cellular inflammation starts because of free radical damage, can be controlled very easily with antioxidants. If you allow it to go uncontrolled long enough, you end up now in a higher state called oxidative stress. But as we have inflammation, we start having issues with insulin resistance increasing, leptin resistance. Leptin is that hormone that basically controls fat regulation, fat storage, fat burning. So if you disrupt that one, just as you do with insulin, you can have leptin resistance. All of a sudden, the brain doesn't recognize leptin anymore. Leptin comes actually from the fat cells themselves. And as such that, it just stops everything because it can't process it. Inflammation creates a protein in the body called C-reactive protein. A very simple blood test tells you have inflammation, won't tell you where, but you want to get that down as close to zero as possible. That means you have no low-level chronic cellular level inflammation. And as such, when you have inflammation, it can actually cause a C-reactive protein. When you do it, C-reactive protein grows, it ends up in the brain, it goes to hypothalamus, it controls the central nervous system, comes down and starts affecting our leptin resistance, which now, again, is an issue with fat regulation, fat burning, fat management. So that's one of those things we need to be aware of. Let's go on now. Stress, one of those things we have every day and most of us ignore. Stress causes our cortisol levels to increase. It causes many, many things to happen. In addition to that, cortisol loves to store fat. It holds on to it. It increases our comfort. We love to just pig out on things because our comfort level, we want to de-stress. And for us, a lot of it, having a drink, having some Hostess, cookies, whatever it may happen to be. But it affects our ability. It affects our limbic system in our brain, our prefrontal cortex. And all of a sudden, our decisions about what foods we want change because we want that good feeling. And when we get that good feeling through food, that takes away that stress. It also affects the quality of our sleep. So there's a lot of things in there that when we have cortisol brought on by stress, along with adrenaline brought on by stress, it just disrupts things. So if we're not doing some kind of stress management on I wouldn't say hourly basis, but a couple, 3 or 4 times a day, there's a problem, and that's a possible cause of why you may not be losing inches or weight. The alcohol is another issue. Alcohol is basically viewed as a poison in the body. It creates a chemical called acetaldehyde. As such, you have that acetaldehyde goes through a couple of different changes, and eventually it ends up as carbon dioxide and water vapor. But alcohol kind of lowers our inhibitions. It lowers our testosterone. It increases our love of our comfort factor for foods. Pound per pound, calorie for calorie, ounce for ounces, twice as many calories in alcohol as there is in protein and carbohydrates. Alcohol also causes the liver to make more fat, make more cholesterol. So we think that 2 ounces of wine may be good, and there's a lot of things saying it is, but it's the 2 or 3 or 4 extra beers that you might have after dinner that become a problem. So it's a moderation issue. If you give it up entirely, yes, that's great. But it's one of those things that if you're having a nightly glass of wine or beer and you're not losing weight and you really want to, that might be a possibility to consider. Sleep is where we really and truly allow the body to repair itself. We need good quality sleep, but we need enough hours of it. 7 to 9 is what most texts say. But that's where our fat burning goes down because our basal metabolic rate slows down a little bit when we sleep. But if we're not getting good sleep, instead of burning fat, we're actually storing fat because we're not using it as quickly as we want. We're not getting enough quality sleep. It increases our appetite. We make poor food decisions. There's just a lot of things that sleep affects that we don't even begin to think about. The primary hormones, these aren't all of them, but these are the ones that really have an impact. Insulin, thyroid, leptin, ghrelin, et cetera. These are the ones that have a primary impact on the ability to lose weight, to lose inches of fat. We know about insulin because that's brought on by sugar, any kind of carbohydrate. You end up with carbohydrates in the body, the fat burning stops instantly. But it takes longer when you have insulin resistance. Thyroid is, again, it controls the rate of our metabolism. You have thyroid problems, that might be something that might want to be checked. You just can't lose weight. Talk to your doctor. There's a lot of thyroid tests out there, and make sure that you're getting the right ones, because sometimes you get a generic one and it's not really the right one you need. Leptin, that's the one that controls our literally our fat management system. It tells our body to stop eating unless we have too much leptin, and then becomes leptin resistance because we get too much fat. It overloads the brain. The brain can't make a decision, so it doesn't do anything. Ghrelin is another hormone, and it tells us to eat. Leptin tells us to stop eating. Cortisol, the one that comes from stress, again, it's the one that causes fat to be stored. Estrogen, testosterone, when you have imbalances in those areas, there's a lot of problems. I listed a few other ones there: POI, NPY, neuropeptide wide. These are other ones that have some aspect dealing with fat burning, fat management. And when they get out of kilter, we have a problem. But the number one hormone, regardless, and mainly for women, but for everyone, if it's out of balance, it's going to cause everything else, cortisol. And that's, I'm going to say, relatively easy to control compared to thyroid. Yeah, thyroid is a major problem, but cortisol is one that affects almost every single one of it. It is a real major problem, and it's not something that is unfixable. It's just we don't even know about it. Okay, medications. Some of them do affect or slow down the fat burning process. Antidepressants have a tendency to dampen aspects of our being, but it also increases our appetite. We talk about a comfort factor. Well, I'm depressed. I need something to eat. I want to feel better. And so we start cranking up the foods that we're eating. Antipsychotics, they slow down the glucose metabolism, but they also increase the levels of cholesterol and triglycerides. Beta blockers in the heart, for heart drugs, cardiovascular drugs, slow down our basal metabolic rate. So those are things that need to be aware of. If you're on any of those types of drugs, and there are other ones too, and you're not losing weight, and it's something that it's really important, talk to your doctor and say, is it possible that this medicine I'm on is stopping or slowing down my metabolism? If your doctor doesn't know, your pharmacist should definitely know. There's a lot of literature out there. Dr. Google, Dr. YouTube have a lot of information on that. You can pull up beta blockers and what can you do to increase your basal metabolic rate. The beta blocker may counsel half or 2/3 of those things that you're doing right, but you just need to know what they are. There are other factors out there too that have an effect on burning. And when you're not burning fat, it affects your weight loss, your inches of loss. And you think, okay, I'm going to cut back on my calories. Well, sometimes cutting back on calories makes sense in theory, but the body knows what it needs. And if all of a sudden you're cutting back, from 2,500 a day to 500 a day, the body says, "Whoa, something's coming. I really need to change. I need to protect myself." And so it shuts down your metabolism to a point that you're not burning anything, even though you're eating next to nothing. That it's kind of crazy. And there's a lot of lessons. If you go into the TV show Biggest Losers, and they were eating thousands of calories a day, and all of a sudden they're cut way back. Well, the body actually inhibits them from losing weight. They're 100, 150, 200 pounds overweight, and they cut back to almost nothing or eating nothing, and they're not losing anything. And you're thinking, this is crazy. But the body's protecting itself because all of a sudden you left this huge void between what you were eating and now down to this. So if you're going to change something, change it incrementally. If you're going to go back 500 calories, change it incrementally. Go back, cut out a couple hundred today, a couple hundred or more. So maybe over the course of a week, you're only cut back 500, 800 calories. Next week, do the same thing. So you're not seeing a big drop off at one point in time. Yes, it will still have a tendency to slow down the metabolism, but it's not going to shut it down almost as much. So there's a lot of issues there with how you take those in and look at some of the lessons learned on Biggest Losers, because there's just so much information there on what worked, what didn't work, what exercise they did. They stopped eating, they exercised a lot, and you would think that, that in and of itself should have been it. I cut back on calories, I increased my exercise, I should be losing weight, and I don't. Well, it's not just a calorie and exercise equation. There are so many other things in there. And when you're that much overweight, your leptin resistance is actually a big hammer, creating problems that if you don't even know about it, then you can't take any action to it. And there are ways to counter leptin resistance. There's ways to counter every single thing I'm talking about here, but that's not the purpose of today's presentation. Today is just awareness and education. What stops fat from burning? Now, if you want to go in and you want to look at caloric intake or hormones, leptin or whatever, go in there, take a look at that. And there's just tons and tons and tons of information. Our genetic factors. We have different genes we get from our parents. Well, genes are controllable. We think, okay, I have a gene for breast cancer. I have a gene for Alzheimer's. I have a gene for this. Well, there's a number of genes in there that affect our, let's call it, fat management system, for lack of a better word. And genes can be turned on or off like a light switch. You can turn genes on or off. And the on and off switch is really dependent on what your lifestyle choices are. And we talk about the foods we eat, the kinds of foods. What are they? The number of calories. We talk about stress management. We talk about exercise. We talk about toxin removal. There's a lot of things in there, and these 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things that if we were doing literally addresses so many different things and so many different aspects of our life. And we just don't know about it. So if you're going to start with a lifestyle change, maybe the first one to start with is calories. I've mentioned this several times in the past. Take your big plate and shrink it down to a salad plate. That's the size of the plate you have. You don't go back for seconds. You just eat what's on that plate. That's a good place to start. Another place is what's on that plate. Is there some green and yellow and red and orange, or is it all one color, brown? Take a look at what you have and then just start making incremental changes to it. Trying to change too many things overnight is going to be a problem. FTO has a gene that addresses, kind of like leptin in a way, how much food we're bringing in, a food intake, for lack of it. I think that's usually what they use, FTO, food intake. The PPARG deals with fat metabolism, how fat burns, how fast it burns. ADRB2 is another one that deals with how quickly does our fat break down. If that gene is activated and all of a sudden we're just not breaking down that fat, we need that gene turned off so that our body goes back to the normal process that it uses to break down fats. The FKDP5 is one that deals with stress susceptibility. If we increase stress, we're increasing cortisol, we're increasing adrenaline, we're creating other problems. We want to eat more. Each of these things have some aspect in the big equation. So it's just not calories plus exercise equals whatever. It's calories plus exercise plus 30 other things in there that we never think about. We talked about salt. Salt has a tendency sometimes we get too much salt. If it tastes good, we eat more stuff. So there's one aspect of salt that says, let me eat more food because it really tastes good. But salt, some of it's iodized. It used to be a long time ago. They took it out. They put it back in. And sometimes the salt that they use doesn't have the iodine in it. I use the Himalayan salt because it's got about 70 plus other, not nutrients, but chemicals, molecules that are needed in the body in a micro level. But iodine is something that affects our thyroid, and sometimes having too much iodine is a problem. Having too low iodine is a problem. And so just taking an iodine tablet as a supplement isn't always the solution. So iodine, salt, thyroid, they're in there. Moderation, something to be looked at. Inactivity. Now we talked about last week, we talked about high intensity interval training because that's the fastest way to get fat into our system and to get fat out of a fat cell. We want it available for burning. It's the fastest way to burn fat. So if we're burning fat and we're doing that high intensity exercise, if we're sitting on a couch, it's just the opposite. We're not burning fat. We're actually causing our metabolism to kind of slow down a little bit. So the demand for energy in our body is directly proportional to the activity that we're doing. If we're going out and walking every day, we get sunshine, fresh air. Yeah, it may not be a lot of intense activity, but 30, 40 minutes every day is a lot of activity, plus all the stuff else that goes along with it, with the UV rays, the IR rays, lots and lots of things out there. But if you're doing any kind of activity, again, incrementally increase it. Just don't go out there and start running. Even if you could run 5 miles in one day, just don't go out there and do it. Walk a half a mile, walk a mile, walk 2 miles. If you want to run, run 3/4 of a mile, walk a 3/4 of a mile. Incrementally increase your activity, because if you start overdoing things, the body's going to say, "Well, something's going wrong." You're just going to hold back and literally work against you. Absorbability is a problem with your gut biome. That's the environment of your gut. That's all the chemicals, the good bacteria, the bad bacteria, the proteins, all the rest of the stuff that's in your intestines and your gut that we talk about, our belly. And when we have a good gut biome, everything is processed through. The nutrients are pulled out of the intestines. Our bodies are fed with everything that we need. Absorbability is there. We get what we need. We don't have any deficiencies in anything. That's the way it should work. But if we have problems in our gut, all of a sudden now we're not absorbing things that we need. And in some cases, there's a situation called leaky gut. Now, there's some conjecture there as to what causes it. My personal belief is that gluten is one of those problems. It's a molecule. It looks almost a mirror image to casein, which is a molecule in dairy. So if you have gluten and dairy, a lot of people who are gluten intolerant are also dairy intolerant. And the reason being is they look so much alike. But there's another protein in the body. It's called zonulin, and it's in the gut. And leaky gut is called intestinal permeability problem. And so when in normal condition, your zonulin opens up little bitty holes and allows the nutrients to flow through, but not all the rest of the garbage that you've been eating that's still in the small intestine or large small intestine. And so you're keeping out all the garbage and trash, but just allowing the molecular level of the good nutrients to pass through the intestinal barrier. It passes through your immune system. 80% of your gut is your immune system, and then gets into the bloodstream. If you have leaky gut, the zonulin opens up huge holes. Now everything that's in your intestine starts dumping into your immune system. Your immune system gets overloaded. It can't handle anything to the same level it used to. And what we have is a thing called autoimmune disease. The immune system can't react the way it's supposed to. And there's at least 100, 130, 140 different autoimmune diseases out there. And when you start having that, now you have another factor in the body, a disease that's hampering the normal operation. So understanding that you need good gut biome, so you need probiotics, you need prebiotics. That's the fertilizer, so to speak, for the probiotics. If you've ever been on an antibiotic, you really need to talk to your doctor about if I'm taking an antibiotic every 12 hours, when should I be taking a probiotic to replace what was killed in the gut? And so there's just a lot of things with our gut. Our gut is essentially our second brain. And when we start affecting the gut, we affect the brain, and our decisions are not as good as they used to be. And that can definitely be a problem. Let's see here what's going on. Next week be the final in this series of 6. And I'm going to talk about exercise and diets and what's effective, what isn't effective. I'll be kind of summarizing things up a little bit. And again, the excess fat that we have in our bodies right now didn't happen overnight. It's not going to go away overnight. We talked last week that sometimes it's going to take 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks for a regimen that we're on to actually be effective, depending on other aspects in our body that are just countering everything. And we don't have the wherewithal, we don't have the discipline to be in it for the long haul. If things don't change in 10 days, we're off whatever we're on. And so that's something that we'll revisit next week. This session today is about awareness, education. The next thing comes is action. But before you take action, especially if you're on any prescription medicines whatsoever, you really need to talk to your doctor about that first, because he or she is the person who knows your situation the best. And if you're going to take some kind of action that's going to counter the effectiveness of a prescription med that you're on to treat a problem that you have, let's make sure that you and your doctor both know about it at the same time, so that if you do go on it and it works, great. If it doesn't work, you have somebody there that's backing you up and that you're accountable for, in order to make sure that, yeah, I'll experiment for 2 months, and if it works, then let's see what we can do. Because sometimes you can cut back on your meds a little bit, and maybe that's all you really need to do. I can be reached at red@red.olaughlin.com. My website is red.olaughlin.com. That's red, I like the color, REDOLAUGHLIN, red.olaughlin.com. My contact information is there. I'm more than happy to have you contact me anytime you can. And I appreciate Dr. Jacalyn for allowing me to present on Talking Heads on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. Thank you, Dr. Jacalyn.